So Kapa Jambijimba moved to Papunya probably in the late 1950s. Kapa had always worked in the area. He grew up at Napabi Station, and then he decided to move south to Haas Bluff, about 30 k's to the south of the current site of Papunya. Jack Cook was a district patrol officer with the old Native Affairs branch of the Northern Territory, and he'd go around to all of the settlements, all the communities in Central Australia. So he was on one of his regular visits, and he went into the store, and somewhere in the back of the store there was a painting hanging probably on a galvanised sheet of iron. Jack had never seen anything like this. It had elements of the Namatjira school. It had a tree and a goanna man running, but it also had a very clear depiction of a ceremonial scene. It was painted on a yellow board, he remembered. Kapa was really aware of what was going on around him. He was politicised. He often talked about issues of equality and government control. He really rebelled against government control and was sort of noted as a troublemaker. People kind of disregarded him, but actually he was thinking all the time. He was sort of moving in front of people. So I think he really imagined a new art that was to talk beyond the settlement, to communicate with the wider world, and to emphasise that his ceremonial law was really important, and that it was from that law that he could gain authority personally, but also for the wider local community. Jack Cook saw this work, which has since been called Mikanji, that's now in the Darwin Museum, and it's a kind of a transitional painting. You can see his ideas developing literally as he moves from left to right across this old piece of recycled board, where you can still see the nail holes where it's been attached to a wall at some time. When Jack Cook saw the painting in the store, he was really excited that someone on the community was showing such entrepreneurship. So he raced over to where Kapa was working and introduced himself. And they're both, capable, engaged people, and they came to an arrangement where Kapa agreed to do more paintings similar to what Jack had seen, and Nosepeg Djubbarula was also in the room at the same time, and Nosepeg was maybe the most important person in the Western Desert at the time. And together they hatched a plan that Nosepeg would get the paintings to Jack in his office in Alice Springs. And then when Jack saw the paintings, he took he had the idea to enter 3 of Kapa's works into the Caltex Art Award. Much to everybody's surprise, on the night of the award, Kapa Jambijimba was co-winner of the Caltex prize, and that would give him a really substantial prize money. But everyone was so excited, Jack Cook in particular, that he took it on himself to sell Kapa's other paintings of the first consignment. The painting that's now called Mikanji and Twirl is possibly the last of that first group of 8 works that Kapa did in the winter of 1971. Kapa was working incredibly fast through ideas at that time. You can see his mind sort of on fire with the possibilities. So in a way you can see the evolution through these 8 paintings as he grapples with ideas and brings figures forward, or figures disappear entirely from the canvas or the board, and he just pushes on. So it appears to me, or would seem to me, that Mikanji and Twirl is the final work that Kapa did before his paintings were taken into Alice Springs and exhibited where he won the prize. So this is where his thinking got to at the moment before his public recognition. The painting was a real turning point. Karpa, the weekend after the award, got the money for the prize, but he also got the money for the sale of at least 6 paintings. So he instantly went to the store and conspicuously bought a side of lamb and a box of groceries, and the photo shows Karpa walking out of the store with a lot of meat and a lot of food. Now, Papunya was a very poor community at that time, so the capacity to go into the store and get enough food to feed the family was really noted by all his peers, who, you know, were custodians of their own law. So they saw potential in what Karpa had just done, and the painting movement went from something that was, people were just sort of working quietly away on small boards, and everybody got really enthusiastic and saw the potential for them to, you know, become artists, as Namatjira had done in the previous decades. But they could see one of their peers, Karpa Djambadzipa, had suddenly sort of grabbed the possibility and created this new form. Nobody had painted like this before, so Karpa kind of invented this form where he sort of imagined ceremony as if from a distance, so he could see all of the elements of the ceremonial ground. He was distilling all of these elements into their most significant forms and bringing them together in relationship to each other. More specifically, this is a painting of an individual, and it's very tempting to think that it might be Karpa himself as the performer in the centre of the ceremonial ground. Certainly, to do a painting like this, you have to know that ceremony. You have to be able to embody the ancestor. So I see the character as Karpa himself in the centre ground. And on either side of him, on both sides of the painting, there are 2 large ground paintings of a water dreaming motif from Mackenzie, and they'd be created with like a mosaic and put on the ground in relief, and probably a couple of 3 metres in their scale. There's also a ceremonial pole that Karpa, talking to him, he once equated those ceremonial poles with telegraph poles. They communicate out into the wider ground, the wider space from the ceremonial ground. And there's also the representation of 2 snakes, and they're carpet pythons from the site Twirl. Well, Karpa was a man of many parts. You know, he was a stockman, he was an entrepreneur, a wheeler dealer, but also he was a lawman, he was a songman. He had a fantastic voice, a powerful singing voice, and like the men of his generation from Napabi, he had an encyclopedic knowledge of the ceremonies in western Madura country and also northern Kukuja country, around the Papunya area in fact. So he would have known all of the verses of the songline. He certainly, I heard him singing the songline of the water dreaming coming in from Kalipimba and then moving up through Mirawari to Mackenzie. He would have also known the songs of the Python that are represented here, but he would have also known at a much deeper level all of the songs for the particular place that he's associated with. Mackenzie and Twirl, it's a really significant painting, and when I first saw an image of this painting and saw an image of the name of Joe Caddy on the back of it, I knew exactly what it was and where it fitted into the scheme of things. Joe Caddy was the judge. So because it's part of that small consignment of Karpa's works that were produced before he won the award, It's just at this moment where, just on the eve of public recognition of Papunya painting. So it represents the kind of summation of his thinking at that moment. It's also part of a sort of separate school of painting. Vivian Johnson, the scholar, has referred to it as the School of Kapa. So, and it's quite different to later dot and circle paintings. You'll notice that there's virtually no dots on the painting. You know, the ceremonial ground is clear, like the cleared earth, prepared for a ceremony. And the figures are there as if in three-dimensional space. So this is a type of painting that Kapa developed, and several of his other peers picked up, his countrymen picked up, and they did paintings in a similar idiom. But it is quite distinct from what happened later. So it's this really extraordinary moment where the sense that Aboriginal culture should be understood. It's sort of just as the assimilation policy is changing. It was created in the early 1970s when the world was changing in very, very radical ways. Kapa was he was a cosmopolitan in his outlook. He was interested in the world, and he was part of that change, that revolutionary change. The next year, Gough Whitlam was elected. So he was part of a whole thing that was happening in Australia at that time. But he really clarified it and distilled it into one of the most powerful statements. And this is, amongst those 8 paintings of the early consignment, this is as great as any of those works.